Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the strategic role of an effective practice manager. In the spirit of reconciliation, Practice Hub acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. Thank you so much for joining us for the latest webinar in our Foundations for Successful Practice Management series. We have had yet another overwhelming response to this webinar, so clearly it's a topic of much interest, and we have a great panel with us this afternoon who will be addressing some of the many questions which have come through during registration, which we thank you for. On our panel this afternoon, we have Gary Smith. Gary is known as the guru of practice management. Gary is an academic director of UNEP health programs and an experienced health practice manager, as well as a former and New South Wales president of the AAPM. Joining Gary, we have Gemma Goff, Senior Operations Manager with over 18 years experience working in healthcare, and Anna Maria Gibb, the co-creator of My Practice Manual, now Practice Hub. Anna Maria has a background in practice management and qualifications in business and adult education. I'll hand over to Anna Maria now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Persephone, and welcome everyone. So I'm just going to run through the overview for today's presentation. We're going to talk about the core principles of practice management, the 5 tasks of strategic management, and then we're going to have some real life experience and commentary around learning from practices, including an inclusive working environment, the open door policy, encouraging solutions, and upskilling and delegating to your practice teams. So I'd like to now hand over to Gary to get us started. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks very much, Anna Maria, and welcome everyone to today's topic, which is the strategic role of an effective practice manager. I suppose one of the challenges we're confronted with is that do we really know what our role is? And I think we have to sit down sometimes and do an analysis of what do we actually do in our practice? Because I think we get, at times we don't see the forest for the trees because we're too busy putting out bushfires as they arise. But what this particular slide actually showed you is really what I call the 8 core strategic principles of practice management. And when we look at our role, let's think about how we can put them into these 8 particular core components: financial management, human resource management, planning and marketing, information management, risk management, governance and organisational dynamics, business and clinical operations, and professional responsibility. I want to reflect on those 8 core principles of practice management and say to yourself, well, what do I do in that space? But when you look at those 8, you say to yourself, most of those are project driven. They're all projects. So strategically, under each one of those 8 areas, there's a strategy that sits behind this. And what's going to be your role, or what is your role, or what may be your future role in strategy as a practice manager under those 8 core principles? If you've been to our series so far, we've actually covered 5 areas. And these are around strategic principles. Well, we talked about managing people effectively. That's about HR. We talked about good governance of quality healthcare. We spoke about risk management for a post-pandemic world, which sits around risk management. Business continuity for planning for a practice shutdown, which is a very well received webinar, which we did. And thanks very much to your feedback in regards to wanting the template that we put together on that. And of course, we looked at strategies for looking after health and well-being of your team, which was the last one which we did, which got a very, very good response. But each one of those webinars have been linked back to the core strategies which we had identified in the previous slide. So let's look at a definition of what is a strategic manager. Well, this particular definition says strategic managers are those who are they're key planners, they're analysers, they're risk leaders, and these particular people establish strategic plans in our business. They also, as what I've said here, handle oversight and development of corporate strategies to support business growth and stability. When we talk about corporate, we're not necessarily talking about practices run by a corporate organisation. We're talking about your individual practice as a corporate strategy. So what is your role as a strategic manager? I think we actually do all the things that it says on this particular slide, but how well developed are your skill sets in relation to identifying yourself as a practice manager, and a strategic one at that? Your strategic manager profile sits around what are your limits of authority? What can you actually do? So it's very important when you're thinking, are you a strategic manager? Does your position description statement reflect what you actually do as a strategic manager within your organisation? When we're talking about being a strategic manager, we use the word plans. Now, there are two types of plans. There are financial plans and non-financial plans. If you start to think about your role of strategic manager, think about those two types of plans. So what are the 5 tasks of strategic management? When we look at the 5 tasks of strategic management, we say to ourselves, well, one of the strategic tasks is for us to manage our vision and our mission of our organisation. Our vision, mission, and what our values may be. We need to develop that, and we need to manage that for our organisation, because everything in our organisation actually spins off our reason for being. And our reason for being is about our mission. It's all about our vision. The second task for strategic management you need to consider is setting objectives and goals for the business. The objectives and goals flow out of what you want to achieve as a vision. So start to think about strategic management. What are the objectives of the business? The third of our tasks of strategic management is designing strategies to achieve the business outcomes. In number 2, you set the objectives. Number 3, this is where the rubber hits the ground. This is designing strategies to achieve business outcomes. What are the strategies? What are the processes? What's the direction? We need to design those. And every strategy will vary from practice to practice in relation to what you want to achieve that flows out from your vision. The fourth task for strategic management is implementing and executing these strategies. This is where the rubber actually hits the road on this. I've got to make this work. I'm about to roll out this strategic imperative. Really important. In point number 4, strategic management, who do I bring along with me in this? And later on in this presentation, you're going to see the importance of bringing people along in relation to point number 4. And of course, with any strategic management, how do I know it works? It is very, very critical to ensure that any strategy which we put into place, we need to evaluate and measure the performance. In evaluating and measuring the performance, we actually have to identify back in dot point number 3 when we're designing strategies, how we are going to evaluate and measure, because in dot point 4, we could put a framework around what data do we collect as a result of evaluating and measuring the performance. So there are my top 5 strategic management points that we may need to think about as a strategic thinking practice manager. The question one is, which of the 5 tasks of strategic management would you like to spend more time on? In relation to those 5 points there, a lot of it can be around, as I said previously, around your limits of authority. What can you do? What can't you do? It may require extra learning for yourself accordingly, or you may have those learnings already in your war chest as a strategic practice manager. Interesting reply in relation to 76%, they designing strategies to achieve the business outcomes. I think the challenge for us all in this one, and I understand the reason why it is the highest, is because we're working in a reactive environment as a practice manager. And we have to design strategies very quickly as a result of external influences on us. It could be as a result of COVID. We had to design strategies really, really quick because of the changing environment on a day-by-day basis. So when we're thinking about that particular, which is number 3, that could be a reactive component to us all as well. So what we need to start to think about as practice managers in the strategic thinking, we need to start to be proactive in our thinking. I'd like you to start to think about the new 10-year plan for healthcare in Australia, right? We need to start to think about that document which is out for comment at present, because that's what's going to make you, and as a good strategic thinker, start to think about points 1 and 2 before you get to 3. So I would like you to start to think about where do you sit in your thinking. So thank you very, very much for that poll. But it didn't surprise me that the third question is where we'd like more time. Anna Maria, I'm going to ask you a question in a moment, but I'm going to blow this myth of time management out of the water. So there's no such thing as time management, Anna Maria, because it's all about task management. You manage the task, the time will manage itself. Now, Time just goes tick, 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 Anna Maria. We can never stop the clock. So what we could do is manage the time. You've only got 38,400 seconds in a day like I've got. It's how we manage those seconds. So start to think about, and people say, I don't have the time for point number 3. Somehow we can think about how we manage the task accordingly. But Anna Maria, planning is such a critical part of a strategic objective, as I've said on here. I've identified 3 main areas of planning at a strategic level. That's the vision, the mission, goals, and objectives. Do you have sort of any suggestions on how you actually start that planning process?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think it's obviously something that the practice manager and practice principals need to get together and think through, particularly the first point. I think often we jump into doing before we should start at planning, before we're at the doing stage. There are some terrific resources out there as well to assist with that. The RACGP, in their General Practice Management Toolkit, they've got a template for business planning, which I think is really useful. The benefit of that, of course, is that it is medical specific. There are a lot of generic business planning tools out there, which are also worth a look. But that one, again, if you're in general practice, but I even think in any type of healthcare practice, that's worth having a look at. Health Engine also have a resource around how to write a business plan. The Australian government has one, and even the National Australia Bank, they have a really helpful business planning template, which I think is quite useful. So there are tools out there to guide you, because often we're not very experienced at this, so it's good to have a kind of roadmap to follow.
Thanks, Anna Maria, on that. Some very, very good tips. The next slide is really around what are the skill sets that we may need for the future when we're looking at our role as a strategic manager. I've made a point before. Have you done self-analysis in regards to what your skill sets may be? If not, maybe you need to sit back and go back to that earlier slide where I gave you the 8 core principles and look at this particular slide and say, well, where are we at in our particular structure? Where are we at as individuals, as a strategic manager, and our strategic thinking? So these 7 points here really are my thinking about what sort of skill sets do I actually need, or you actually need, as a strategic manager for the future. I actually think the first one is a good understanding of project management, because as I have said to you before, most of those 8 core points I indicated earlier are around project management. You think about what you do every day, compartmentalize your thinking and say, that was actually a project. Whether it's accreditation, implementing new software, implementing new policies and procedures for cold chain, whatever it may be. These are project-driven stuff. So think about a good understanding of project management. I think I'll get back to you on that one tomorrow. The ability not to procrastinate. I think I'm the worst person on this. The last 10% I struggle with because I'm off doing something else. So I like someone to come along and bundle up that last 10% and says, right, then, and here it is for you. You need to realize that in procrastination as an individual, that doesn't allow other people in your organization to move forward as well. If you procrastinate on something, it's going to stifle the process within your organization, within your practice. It's okay saying, look, I'll get back to you on that, or I don't know an answer. I'll work through that. So procrastinating, not having an answer, and telling someone not having an answer is really important. High EQ, interpersonal and communication skill sets. With the changing environment of our healthcare system, I actually think that we as strategic managers will not be able to succeed in delivering the vision and the mission of our practice unless we bring people along with us to deliver it. Who are our champions? Who is going to deliver our vision or our goals or expectations? The challenge that you and I have got is that how do we manage the way in which our staff think? How often do we hear, oh, if only they thought like me, I might as well do it myself. Well, that's a big challenge for us, that particular statement. High EQ, high EI is so important to understand how other people think. The ability to be objective and analytical and be positive, I think, is a good strategic manager. Analytical, collect information is important. Take an objective view rather than a closed view, because there are many options for us out there in strategy. We need to have an open mind in the way in which we think. Have a very good understanding of technology and how it is used. This is the future for us. If you think in the last 5 years there's been a lot of technology in the way in which we change things, think again, because there is so much more is coming, especially in the 10-year health plan for healthcare system. The greater use of technology, which we're going to have to use for things like voluntary patient registration, etc. Have the ability to multitask. That is a skill set. A lot of people tell me that females have a better process than what us males do. And of course, the last one is organisational skills accordingly. Managing people effectively. I've touched on some of this already, managing people effectively and how important this is. The next couple of slides sort of give you an indication about HR, recruitment lifecycle and performance management system. There's some strategic thinking and there's operational thinking. Workforce planning, I just want to highlight here. I had a question come in and the question was around succession planning of managers and owners. This is a critical challenge for us. It really is in our thinking. So workforce planning, we need to think about how do we do this strategically. My only advice in relation to workforce planning is start to have the crucial conversation around setting limitations of exit, of retirement. We need to sit back and then do a gap analysis or a skills analysis of what am I going to need as with these people possibly moving on. Where's our upskilling of staff who may take those roles on? Where's the mentoring program accordingly? So when we start to look at managing people effectively, in that slide just shows you exactly what a performance system may look like and a recruitment cycle may look like. Now, Gemma, let's talk about the performance management systems that are identified in this particular slide here. How do you decide in your day-to-day role on what measures and what to improve on when you are looking at your performance management processes within your organisation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gary. Hi, everyone. So our performance management system is actually very bespoke, and it starts right from the start of recruitment for newbies, where we would implement some key training and development induction around what our business objectives are. So making sure that every decision we've made is around our vision, mission, goals and values, and that they align with the team's position descriptions. So as we get to know the team members and we look at their strengths and weaknesses, we tailor their sort of growth opportunities and what we can sort of guide them towards working towards those team goals. So annual performance reviews is another great one. So once the staff are through their probations, we would do annual performance reviews, and that's an opportunity to make sure that the team is still focused and understanding the mission of their clinic and what we're here trying to achieve together. Before we have those reviews, we will often ask the staff to complete a performance review form, which gives an opportunity for them to really think about their contribution to the business goals and how they've contributed and how they'd like to in the future. And then we'll look at those targets for the coming year of how they can support the business in achieving those goals. So it starts right from day one, right at the start of the recruitment process, where we share with them what we're here to do, what we're looking to achieve. And we'll work with them, making sure that everything we set is smart. That we've actually got deadlines, that they're reviewed, that we have those conversations with them to make sure that they frequently understand what we're working towards. So yeah, it starts right from day one.
Thanks very much, Gemma, for those insights in relation to how it works in your organisation. One of the areas I want to quickly touch on in strategic thinking is scope of practice in relation to practice managers and their position description statements. I actually think that part of your position description statement should have a section based around strategy of the organisation. And strategy may be around things like the human resource management strategy, financial strategy, but mainly around your limits of authority. So how often do you go back and review your particular position description statement? Now, Anna Maria, I know that Practice Hub have an excellent position description statement, which actually addresses this whole aspect of strategic and operational as well.
Yes, Gary, that's right. And I think, that term practice manager is so kind of broad, and it really varies from one organisation to another. And the scope of people's roles, even if they have the same title, can be very different. But I think it's worth reflecting on those core principles and thinking about to what extent do you have that level of control or authority to determine the strategic positioning of that for the organisation.
Thanks very much. We might move on to the next slide, which is risk management for a post-pandemic world where we're talking about strategic thinking as well. When we look at the strategic thinking, we've got the planning, we've got financial goals, we've got practice performance as well. When we're looking at this particular slide, we've touched on some of these areas in our job description of what's strategic and what's operational. So these two particular slides actually form a really good framework for you to go back and revisit your position description statement and say, well, maybe I need to think about this in regards to where I sit within my practice in regards to strategic and operational. Now, Anna Maria, let's quickly have a look at practice performance and around risk management. I know this is one of yours and my favourite topics. And as part of our strategic thinking for the practice manager, what may be some tips in promoting risk management culture within your practice? Because we know it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably things that a lot of practices are already doing that maybe need to really reinforce are things like a no blame culture, around a culture of open disclosure, having that sort of transparency around how things are done, and also things like keeping risk registers, which is a good way of being able to identify trends in risks and things that you need to prioritise to manage. And as we did in a previous webinar, we talked all about, the risk matrix and how you prioritise which risks you need to deal with. So I think those are ways in which practices can manage their risk and minimise and mitigate them as well.
Right, thanks very much. In our next slide, the other area of strategic thinking is around good governance for quality healthcare practices. Once again, what we've done here is that we've identified 3 areas in good governance, and that's identifying and analysing risk, promoting a risk management culture, and managing regulatory compliance. And what we've done on this slide, we've split up what we believe are a strategic approach, which you should be thinking about, and the operational approach. Now, the challenge that you and I have got is that, do I do both? Am I a strategic person, but I have to do all the operational and administrative as well? And do I have those other staff to do the operational and administrative, or does that sit with me as well? So as Anna Maria said, my comment is that what's in a title? What's in a name? Names will vary, but it's the role, the work that I do, which determines what my... So don't be too hooked up on the title of who you are or what you are. It's actually the work which you'll do and you do. And your position description statement will reflect on that. The next slide is actually the strategic thinking, is business continuity planning for a practice shutdown. We covered this in the last webinar, and we just went through strategically what do we need to do strategically, but analysing risks, developing systems and managing resources. And then we had some strategic thinking on this, and then we had some operational thinking. Most of us in our strategic was really reactive, because every minute of every day, of every hour, of every week, things kept changing. So this is that reactive model as well. The last one was the one which we did on strategies for looking after health and well-being of our team. And this becomes a real challenge for us in regards to the environment which we're working in now, the lockdown environment. And we had to ensure that our workplace was safe. Our workplace be either in the workplace or maybe in the home workplace as well, because a lot of people were working from home. And the challenges we had there was supporting the team. So we set a strategic set of goals around that, and how did we do that from there? And that was a well-received webinar, which we did. We're going to post a poll here now, which we'd like you to complete. The question is, how do you currently divide your time? 80% strategic, 20% admin, 50-50? Or 20% strategic and 80% admin and ops? How do you divide the majority of your time? Well, what will reflect on this? If I was looking at this, I'm the first one. I'm the 80-20, 80 strategic, 20% admin and ops. My staff wouldn't want me anywhere near the front desk. Accordingly, and I'm wonderful. I'm paid to take the helicopter view and look at strategy and direction in my particular practice. So for me, I'm number one. Anna Maria, when you were working in private practice, where would you sit on this?
I think probably around the 50-50 mark. And it's also, I guess, Gemma's going to talk about the Eisenhower Matrix, but I think it's that case of, sometimes we get caught up in urgent rather than important. So I think that that's often where, you end up in that admin ops space because you're dealing with urgent.
Right. Gemma, where would you fit in that?
I would agree. I'm with you, Gary. I actually would say I'm now more 80% strategic and 20% admin. However, it's not always been like that. I've probably spent the last 18 months sort of doing the upskill and delegation that I'll talk a little bit about later, and that's put me in a position to be more 80% strategic.
Great. I wasn't too surprised with this. 20% strategic, 80% admin. Most practice managers sit in that particular space. The challenge for the people who tick the 80-20-80, you're really going to start to think about what is my role strategically in the organisation. Maybe you are doing some of that strategic stuff now more than what you think you are. So let's just review your position description statement. Now, Gemma, what tips can you provide for a practice manager ensuring that there is a safe working environment as what we identified on this particular screen here?
Yeah, it's so important. I think you referred, Gary, a moment ago to those position descriptions. I think that's a great starting point. I think, an annual review of that, along with your performance review on what's changed in your position description, is really important. So that's a great starting point. Effective policies and procedures, and that's where the Practice Hub really is great. You can always rely on those policies and procedures being in line with, legislation, and, they're easy to read. And so it's easy to push those out onto your teams and make sure that they are compliant, which keeps them safe. Little things that we have within our clinics. So we have a PFI book, a Please Fix It book, which is where the sort of physical work health and safety comes in. So if a lock's broken on a door, or the toilets are blocked or something like that, it goes in the book, and somebody is responsible, not me, but one of the other team is responsible to ensuring that those jobs are fixed. Open door policy, let your team know that they can come and knock on your door and talk about their issues. Let them know about an employee assistance programs, counselling services, encourage them to go and see their GP. Flexible working, there's times where we've all got challenges at home which may want us to have more flexible working. Ensuring your team take breaks. We're all so busy all the time. The pandemic has really thrown in that curveball that seems to just been going on forever. So, leading by example, taking your tea breaks, taking your lunch breaks, actually is really, really healthy to do. And once your team start to see that you're doing it and that it's okay to take the breaks, they'll do the same. So there's just a few things that we work on within our clinic.
Gemma, thanks very much for that. And I think as practice managers, we need to be aware of what our requirements are under work health and safety, which is really important, that particular legislation, because your directors of your practice are personally liable as a result of work health and safety legislation. So it's a really important component of that. Gemma, I might hand over to you now to take us through some real life operational components of being a strategic manager.
Thanks, Gary. An inclusive working environment is really important. It's something that should be demonstrated right from your interview process and your onboarding. What is an inclusive environment? Well, for me, that's when everybody feels welcome. So everyone is valued for their contributions to the clinic, everyone is appreciated, and that's despite of gender, race, education, social background. We instill this culture right from interview. We present our vision and mission, goals, etc. at our intake events that we run, and we discuss our expectations with candidates, what we expect from them and what they will get in return. We are so lucky at our clinics that we are multicultural, which means that we have an amazing opportunity to bring everyone together, and we host what we call Bring a Dish lunches. And there's something rather therapeutic about walking into the lunchroom with the smells of dishes from all around the world and hearing the stories about why that dish is important to them. So those sorts of things, along with supporting religious holidays. Being multicultural, we support not only the Christmas Easters, but Eid, Diwali. So we would look to the GPs who are happy to share their experiences and their knowledge around those events as well, so that we get to learn about their cultures. Working party meetings, we do a lot more of those now than we used to. We have an opportunity to call on admin support and the clinical support and talk to them about things that we've got going on in the clinic. And right from a couple of years ago, we transitioned from bulk billing to mixed billing clinic. And that was a challenge, a huge challenge. And looking back now, what we should have done is implemented those working party meetings where we would have more input from GPs and, the admin staff. So those on the front line, rather than just making decisions as a management team. So we've learned from those mistakes. And now we have a lot more input from everybody. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of any ideas we might have, and they get to voice their opinions, share their thoughts on how they think it might work or not work. And they're more engaged generally once you've made your decisions. So when you're rolling out something new, they bring others along for the ride. So that's really good. We do try and create a just culture. Now, this is more about systems thinking. So it's a process problem rather than a person problem. Nobody comes to work with the intention to make mistakes or frustrate people. When you delve a little deeper, it's generally because the person doesn't understand the role, doesn't understand their expectations. So we flip that a lot now. And it's really not a case of Sally doesn't know what she's doing. It's actually Sally might not have been trained appropriately. It might be more about, she needs to be trained in a different way. And we can learn about training styles by using tools such as the Kolb's Learning Style Questionnaire, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So open door policy and encouraging solutions. Being visible to your team is really important. I currently run 2 GP practices. We have 17 GPs working across the 2 sites, and we've got 7 more coming, so signed, and we've got staggered starts for the 7 GPs. So it's a super busy team, lots of nurses and support staff, but my team know that on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm at one clinic, and a Tuesday and a Thursday I'm at the other, and my door is always open. I am happy for everyone to come in and have a talk about whatever is on their mind. I sit in an office behind reception so I can hear what's going out on the front desk, and I can go out and offer support when it's required. And I sit with my fabulous personal assistant and an amazing senior patient services officer, and we work really closely on those strategic goals, what we're working on towards as a clinic. Quiet time is really important as well. Like, it is so busy for everybody right now, and it's always busy. It's always going to be like this. So finding some time for yourself just to gather your thoughts, to refocus. Much of what I do now is very helicopter, a bit like Gary was talking earlier. I've transitioned out of the day-to-day, and my fabulous team just run the clinics. I have absolute confidence they'll continue to do an amazing job and leave me to focus on things like sustainability, opportunities for growth. So if you can have a quiet room, if there's a doctor away on a day, and you can go and lock yourself away in their room and just gather your thoughts and get back on top of things, then it's really worth doing. Encourage problem-solving conversations. Now, I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years pushing back to staff when they've come to me with a problem. I'm absolutely happy for you to come and tell me what's going on and what's frustrating you, but come to me with a solution as well. Who better to fix the problems? Those that are experiencing it. So you guys can start this by just listening to the problems, but pushing back and saying, well, what can you do to make this better? The team generally now go to those senior patient services officers and will share their frustrations, but propose solutions with them. And the reason I want those conversations with the leadership team is to ensure that those solutions meet our clinic values, that they meet legislation, governance, legal, etc. Your values shouldn't just be words stuck up on a wall. They should be things that you live by every day. Every decision you make should be based on your clinic's values. And by encouraging the conversations based around those, it just becomes more natural for your clinic to be working towards them. Sometimes it can be a bit scary when you're used to having the control of making those decisions without the input from your team, and it can be really hard to start to loosen the reins in that way. But don't be frightened. Just be mindful that not to brush it off, but ask questions if you've got concerns. Why do you think that would work? Have you thought about if this happened as well? And let them have a go. Like, if they really want to trial a solution, let them. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, that's okay. And you need to let them know that's okay, that it's actually a learning opportunity. It's actually another fantastic way for you to introduce PDSAs to your team. Trialing solutions, making them aware that there's a deadline to implement it, a deadline to review it. And did it work well? Did it not work well? What can you do differently? So upskilling and delegation. I spoke a moment ago about the Kolb's Learning Style Questionnaire. This is something I use frequently when recruiting team members. It's a fabulous tool, and it is designed to find out what style of learning suits you. So are you the type of person that needs to read the manual before you turn the TV on? Or do you just turn the TV on, grab the remote control and have a play around and see if you can get it to work? There's no right or wrong, but it's really important for you to know what kind of learner your newbie is so that you can tailor their training and development and their mentoring with the right person. It's a complete waste of your time if you're telling the person that needs to read the manual first that this is what you do, bish, bash, bosh, and expect them to go. Like, it's a complete waste of time. They get overwhelmed, everyone gets frustrated, and then you've got to 3 months later start again. The Eisenhower Matrix, I talked about this in the webinar last month, and I'm hoping some of you may have started to use it because it's an amazing tool. All of our leadership team do this. It is a to-do list, basically a fancy to-do list of all your tasks. What is urgent and important? What do you really need to get done? Versus what's important but is not too pressing, to things that are not urgent and not important that you actually just don't even need to be doing. So things you just keep doing all the time because you've always done them, but really you don't need to. It's a great way to look at the tasks that you can train somebody else to do, the things that you can upskill your team to delegate to somebody else. My leadership team send me their Eisenhower Matrix by 10 o'clock every Monday morning. I will review them and have a look at what everyone's got planned for the week. If I find somebody's working in urgent and important too much, they're clearly stressed. There's clearly something not quite right with their workday. They're either being thrown numerous curveballs and there's something we need to address. So who else on their matrix has got some capacity? We pair them up so they can support one another through the day. That tool has been life-saving for us. It's been great for an opportunity for everyone to really look at what is expected of them in their roles. There was a time where people were putting tasks down on their matrix that had absolutely nothing to do with their position descriptions. So it's making sure that everyone is actually focused on the task that they've been recruited to do. Having faith in your team, this is just so important. You will be amazed at how receptive your team will be when you have a little faith in them. I've recently read one of John Maxwell's leadership books where he says, every person has seeds of greatness within, even though they may currently be dormant. When you believe in people, you water the seeds and give them a chance to grow. And that is exactly what we've been doing at our clinic. Our clinic owner likes to think that he's created a nursery style environment at our clinic where everybody has the opportunity to grow. And we've had some fabulous feedback in this regard. We've got staff that have gone on maternity leave, and whilst they've been excited about having a new baby at home, they've actually been devastated that they're missing out on what we're working on at the clinic. Those that have come back from maternity leave and have seen such change in their peers, such personal growth, and can't wait to be getting that success themselves. So it's certainly hard work. We've had our ups and downs, but keeping that positive mindset, not permitting negative talk within your teams is really important. And you will make it work. It's totally worth it. We've got a much more pleasant environment, more positive environment now that we've sort of stopped permitting that negative talk. Team delegation is key to the success of your practice. One of the questions that came in, I think Gary touched on before, it was about sort of succession planning, and another was about whether or not larger practices would perhaps have 2 practice managers or more. Being a large practice ourselves, I can say that you don't have to stick to what you think is the norm. Like, look at what works for your practice. We did a complete gap analysis and skills assessment on everybody. What were people's strengths? How can we use those? And we actually created some very different roles. So I have an amazing personal assistant. We also have a senior patient services officer, and also training and development and clinic administrators. So have a look at those within your roles as well. So believing in your team, believe in them before they succeed. So tell them you've got faith in them, you've got confidence in them. Emphasize their strengths, list their past successes, instill confidence when they fail. Let them know it's okay that if it doesn't work, that we'll try it again a different way. Experience some wins together. And that's the best bit. Visualizing their future success and expect a new level of living. It's amazing when you have the faith and the belief in your team, how they come together, and it changes not just their work environment, but their home as well. Just food for thought to finish off. So your goal as a leader is to nurture others' personal growth and independence. So if you nurture others, but allow them to become dependent on you, you're really hurting them, not helping. To be an effective leader, you don't have to be happy all of the time or be a cheerleader, but you do need to model and attract an attitude of positive vision during tough times. And that is really, really important. Give others recognition at every opportunity. It will build them up and motivate them. Encouragement is like oxygen to the soul. Thank you.
Gemma, thank you very, very much for those hands-on experiences in relation to thinking as a strategic manager. And I think a lot of food for thought you've put out there for us today. I suppose it more so thought than food, I think. So when we're looking as your role as a strategic manager and for your strategic thinking there is just some points I just want to highlight today. Firstly, as your role as a strategic manager or a strategic thinker, we suggest you go back and review your position description statement. What are your limits of authority in regards to what you can do in your organisation? The other part of strategic is carry out a gap analysis of what your skill sets may be or what your other staff skill sets may be, because you'll find that there will be people in your organisation that will be able to assist you in regards to your strategic approach as well. I think there's quite a lot we have to do this crucial discussion with who you report to regarding your role. Where does the trust sit in this? Where's the empowerment sit in this? And if you don't believe you're being utilised to your best, your ability in strategic thinking, have that crucial discussion with your principal or your supervisor accordingly. We can't stress enough as a strategic practice manager to obtain further knowledge, ongoing education. Life's a learning journey. I know Gemma's the same and I'm the same. Every day we continue to learn. The day we give up learning is the day we decide it's time to retire accordingly. And I think one of the biggest, most important parts of becoming a strategic practice manager is to network with like-minded people. Get involved in coaching and mentoring, because you're going to learn so much from other people. Networking is so critical, especially in this day and age when we're moving into such a rapid change in the environment which we work in. So I'm going to hand across now to Anna Maria, just do a Practice Hub demonstration. What's maybe the resources that Practice Hub actually has?
Thanks, Gary. All right, so talking about Practice Hub, in the time that we have, I'm obviously not going to give you an in-depth demonstration of the product, but what I would like to highlight is where this fits in with the discussion that we've had with Gary and Gemma. And I think the important part of Practice Hub is, after you've done your vision and your mission and you're thinking about your strategies, you need to operationalize these things as well. So, and this is, I think, where Practice Hub comes in. So initially with your vision and your mission, Gemma made the point, it's not just word on a sign hung on the wall, but you need to really live those values and that sort of thing. And this is a way of being able to keep those values and your mission front and center for all of your team, and have that even, for new starters, and even just that reminder, these things, if they're front of mind for people, they're more likely to really start to live them. So you can see here, I've got an example of, the Mayo Clinic, which, they have their mission, their value statements, etc. And I'd encourage you to do things like create a welcome video, get the practice team or the practice principals to do a welcome video that people can see, that you can run for new starters, that will give them a sense of, how the practice thinks and how they want to work together. And so when it comes to operationalizing a lot of these things, I sort of think about, when it comes to human resource management, having all of this documented and transparent will save you a lot of time, so that you're not constantly being reactive. But if you've been proactive and thought about these things initially up front, you'll probably spend less time putting out fires when the unexpected occurs. So for example, if I have a look under our governance tab here, we've got some planning and goal setting, so something that you do regularly, and disaster recovery planning, which is just a good example, was the practice shutdown. If you had a disaster recovery plan, you're basically finessing what you already have, not starting from scratch. So having those things in there right from the start is really important. Even things around human resource management, have a clear code of conduct right up front. Have policies around, if people aren't meeting acceptable use of internet and email, for example, how will you investigate them? What will be the disciplinary process? Even down to simple things like leave arrangements. So, obviously one of your objectives is to have a well-functioning practice with the correct number of staff available at all times. So what would leave arrangements look like? How many people with the same role can go on leave at the same time? How much notice do they need to give you so you can plan? And if you've already pre-thought these things and documented them, and people are aware of them, then you're going to have less likelihood of 3 people coming to you at the same time saying, we all want the same week off next month. So again, this is about operationalizing all those objectives that you have created as well. Now, one of the core principles is around financial management, and I'm pleased to report for those of you watching and listening today that we will be releasing some new financial management policies in the next month or so. So keep an eye out for those, because I think that's also going to be really useful as well. Gary mentioned some of the resources too that we have in Practice Hub, and I always come back to whether it's resources or policies. It is definitely much easier to edit something that someone else has written than to start from scratch. So when we do think about that business planning, we have goal writing tools, we have force field analysis that you can go through. And on one of the slides, I know Gary's mentioned the SWOT analysis. So just having those templates rather than having to find them or think them up yourself. You know, it's very apparent that Gemma has done a whole job analysis and looked at what roles are needed within the practice. And I think, you know, sort of throwing out all those standardized positions is probably worked so well for you. And I think that's how we need to look at what outcomes are we looking for? What do the roles need to look like to achieve those outcomes? But also, again, don't start from scratch. If you have decided that, you know what, an office manager could be good, or even a personal assistant, have a look at the template that we've already prepared and you can go through. And I tend to think it kind of carries you 80 to 90% of the way there, and you can just refine it for your own requirements. But once again, save time, be more strategic in how you use your time, source good content and good information and work with that as well. So I think that's really important. So we've had those business planning tools. We talked about business continuity. The other, I guess, policies and procedures to highlight would be around things, certainly in the governance and management area, you know, workplace health and safety policies. You know, what are your policies around managing patients with difficult behaviour? When it comes to information management, you know, once again, information recovery is key. Roles and responsibilities, again, coming back to what do we need to know? Who's responsible? So our computer security coordinator, all of the things they're responsible for, which will also be in their job description. And that might be part of someone's role, that this is one of their responsibilities, but having all of that clearly documented. So also the rest of the team know who they need to go and talk to if they have questions about these things. And policies that, you know, again, managing access, who can see what, internet and email usage. Another one that's so topical, the social media policy, you know, what's your policy around acceptable use of, you know, talking about the practice on social media as well. So having all of these things already processed and thought through, I think will save a lot of time and effort in the long run. Again, allowing you, for those of you who are in the 80% admin, hopefully helping you to slide along a little bit more into the strategic, because you've already thought through these systems and they're very easy to update as well. All right, so with just a few minutes to go, again, if you're already a Practice Hub client and you would like some more support, please contact us. If you've contacted our support team, you know how fantastic and friendly they are. If you're not a client, please arrange to have a demonstration where you'll see much more than what I've shown you today. And there will be, of course, the resources. There are links to all the previous webinars in this series on our website. You can contact us on any of these formats. And lastly, just basically thank you for your attendance. Don't forget to keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars and also our Facebook Live events. So if you're not following Practice Hub on Facebook, and you do have Facebook, please follow us and you'll be able to see when our Facebook Live events are coming up. In those, we talk about different policies and procedures. So less about the technology, more about the policy and procedure content. And again, can I thank Gary and Gemma? That was just a terrific presentation and very much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks very much, Anna Maria.